Welcome to Mind Over Matter, where we feature young Jamaicans who are shooting for the stars. I'm your host, Margaret Boyne. Remember, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do and hit that notification bell. Today we have another remarkable guest who is not only a travel blogger on a mission to explore Jamaica and the world, but she's also a young doctor who is pursuing a doctorate in internal medicine. She has managed to blend academia and adventure as she shares her experiences with the world. So whether you're a fellow student looking for motivation or a traveler in search of your next destination, you're in for a treat. My guest is Rochelle Knight. Welcome to Mind Over Matter, Rochelle.
Thank you for having me.
I see you're traveling all over Jamaica on social media. You're a travel blogger. So when did this interest start?
Okay, so it actually began in 2016. That was a year where I began exploring Jamaica more intentionally. And I would get a lot of questions from friends and family saying, I see you post this picture, how I find this place. And I'd get those questions over and over again. So I opted to start documenting these adventures in a more public fashion. So that way my tips could help other persons. And I began, to be exact, on December 28, 2016. And over time, it has grown where my audience isn't even a mostly local audience anymore. It's become more of a global platform where I have readers from at least over 100 countries now. So it's definitely been a labor of love, and it's something I truly enjoy.
Okay, so you were in school at that time, 2016?
Yes. Yes, right. I was actually in third year of medical school.
So how were you able to be doing both?
To both? Well, my blogs would have been a lot more infrequent back then. It was just purely a hobby. The clerkships in medical school are arranged in 5 or 10 week blocks. So you would have an exam at the end of every 5 or 10 weeks. And usually what I would do to celebrate and to relieve the stress would be to go somewhere new. So usually, every 5 weeks on a Friday or a Saturday, I would be going somewhere across the country, mostly on a day trip though. And then I would use the next day to document it. So I would probably be posting articles maybe once a month initially. Sometimes what would happen as well is we would do clerkships outside of Kingston. So I rotated at other hospitals like Cornwall Regional, Mandeville Regional, Maypen Hospital, and St. Anne's Bay, to name a few. So while I would be staying in another side of the island, I would use the opportunity on a weekend or anytime I wasn't at school/work to go out and explore, and I would write about it.
Okay.
Things moved on from there.
Do you remember the first trip that you wrote about?
Yes, the first trip I wrote about was Cane River Falls in Bull Bay, St. Andrew.
Is it a blog mainly about Jamaica, or you've been to other countries?
Okay, so it's still mostly about Jamaica since that's where most of my travels lie. But I have written about trips to other countries, namely Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Peru.
Oh, so you're planning to go all over the world now?
Oh, yes, for sure. I just need to have the time.
So were you a child who always loved nature?
Yes, I love nature, and I also loved writing. I used to write novels and even illustrate comics for fun. That was always my outlet as a child. And over the years, I guess as you grow older, some of your hobbies kind of die. That was one of them for me. So travel blogging in a way has revived a long time hobby of mine, which is just writing and sharing adventure.
So how do you find your destinations, and how do you find the places that you want to visit? Yeah.
Boy, in so many ways. One is sometimes word of mouth. So if I know someone from another part of the island, sometimes they'll say, you ever got this place, or you ever hear about this place? And I would say, no, man, tell me more. And they would share directions, or they would even put me onto somebody who can carry me there. So that's one of the ways. The second way will be just by reading other travel blogs. You'll find that foreigners sometimes tend to know Jamaica a little better than Jamaicans. There are lots of foreigners with travel blogs, profiting and monetizing Jamaica, and I would read their adventures and draw inspiration.
But there's a view though, Rochelle, that boy, for you to know the places or to go anywhere, you need money. What do you say about that?
That's something I'm always happy to dispel. It is true to some degree that you need money for some places, and that tends to include like the hotels or anywhere which is marketed as luxury travel. But that doesn't have to be the case. There are lots of rivers and waterfalls which are just free community gems. And I found that whenever I venture into a new community or somewhere that's unfamiliar, especially in the country, people are always so excited to hear, oh, you come from town and you end up in this little part of St. Thomas or Trelawney or Hanover or wherever, you know, people always excited to find out where you come from. And when they hear you're not from there, it's like they welcome you with open arms. And you'll find that these places, as I said, they're community gems, so they're free. There's no admission fee. They qualify somewhat as off the beaten path, meaning you won't always find these spots in the travel brochure. You basically have to know somebody or follow somebody who will put you onto some of these gems. And when I find these places, I barely spend any money at all. Sometimes they may charge a little $100 or $200 for maintenance, because there's usually like a community person who will appoint him or herself as the caretaker. So you pay their maintenance fee, or you may leave a tip if you feel so moved. And you also have to account for transport fees, meaning things like gas or toll if necessary. And that's it. That's literally all I spend for the most part when I am traveling around Jamaica.
You mentioned off the beaten path. Can you give us an example of one of those places?
Sure. Let's see where to start. Maybe I would say, okay, let's start with my parish, St. Andrew. There is very recently I wrote about this great house, which is based in Mount James, which is rural St. Andrew, a little bit past Stony Hill and Golden Spring, somewhere in that environment. And there's a river there. There is no entrance fee. So the fact that it's not really listed in like a travel brochure or anywhere that would, you know, promote destinations in Jamaica, I would consider that to be off the beaten path. Other examples would include waterfalls in Gordon Town, and the rivers in Gordon Town as well. There are different sections of the Hope River just lying by the side of the road. And if you're even driving up the road to say Irish Town, Newcastle, Holywell, you will see just regular local people frolicking in the river. There's nothing stopping you from parking and putting on your swimwear and jumping in with them. Those are the closest examples I can think of to Kingston.
Okay. So what about photography? You're good with the camera as well?
You know, people often think I have a professional camera. I don't.
No? Okay.
I take most, if not all, my pictures with my Samsung phone, which offers pretty good quality. I think phones nowadays, especially if you have one of the latest models, you will get very good camera and video quality with a Samsung or even iPhone device. Yeah, I don't have a professional camera.
You had mentioned traveling to Peru. What was that like?
That was a bucket list item for me for years. I'm very fascinated by indigenous culture on a whole. So Taínos, the Caribs, or I guess we call them Kalinagos now, depending. The Incas and Mayans, all those groups of people, I'm always very fascinated by just pre-Columbian people or Amerindians and their lifestyle. So just to think that there was this Incan ruin, Matchu Pichu in particular, that was just lying there uninhabited for years after the conquest of the Incas. And to think that, you know, it was just rediscovered, so to speak, in the 1900s, which is very recent, just about 100 years ago, was when this ruin that has been lying there for centuries was rediscovered. I've always had Machu Picchu on the top of my list of the wonders of the world to visit. So I planned that trip basically on my own. Well, myself and my partner who had gone with me, we just researched how to get there, the flights to get there, and we looked up how to buy the ticket, translated all those Spanish websites, and just got up and went.
Okay.
Yeah, it was wonderful, I must say. They preserve a lot of their old architecture very well alongside the new buildings. So you will find you'll be walking down the streets and you'll be seeing buildings that are, preserved from as far back as the 1300s and 1400s, standing right next to a building that was newly constructed maybe 5-10 years ago. So I found that very inspiring to see their attention to detail and their value and appreciation of their history.
So if you're a lover of history, then traveling is good for you.
It's a perfect fit.
So you have been all over Jamaica. What would you say is one of the most beautiful spots that you have discovered?
Okay, so by far, the Blue Mountain Peak Trail has been my favorite. It's a very intense hike. It's a very long hike. I did it in the wee hours of the morning, which is what most people recommend is best. You hike as early as 2:30 in the morning by flashlight. You see some amazing views of Kingston. You can actually see all the twinkling city lights in the distance. It's very beautiful on the way up, even at night. And then to see the sunrise from there, I have never witnessed anything that comes close. It was very beautiful. And on the way down as well was lovely because now you get to see all the plants and birds and flowers that you would have missed in the night on the hike up. So it was basically a sensory overload for the entire journey, both up and down that trail. That's number one for me.
What are some of the most valuable lessons that you have learned while journeying around Jamaica?
All right. So number one for me is that everyone has a story to tell. I think that is the most valuable lesson I've learned, in that you meet people of all walks of life. You'll meet I've met some of, the most learned and distinguished people doing similar hikes as myself. When you hear their background, you're like, wow, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought a professor of history or professor of this or that would be in cargo shorts and t-shirts hiking these same trails as me, and then at the same time you meet the opposite end of the spectrum. You'll meet the local community man who probably don't have anything more than a primary school education, yet at the same time he is very knowledgeable about the area, very knowledgeable about the plants and their health benefits. And sometimes people will teach you things, things that this plant has this property and that property. And it's very interesting to think that everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has a bit of knowledge to share with you. No matter how learned you think you are, there is somebody who knows something and can add value to your life that you will meet while going on an adventure sometimes. And you get to also see that there are a lot of acts of kindness out there. Jamaica isn't always as gloomy as the news makes it out to be. Yes, we have a lot of crime. Yes, we have our social ills, but there are a lot of really good people who will look out for you when you visit somewhere new, or they'll be happy to give away their produce from their farms. And sometimes you feel away taking these people's things, but they want to give you because they're just so happy to have met you. And I think that's been very, very impactful for me. That would be my number one lesson. And the second thing I think I've learned is that, well, you learn a lot of self-reliance too. Adventures don't always go as planned.
Yes.
Sometimes you may end up with a flat tire somewhere, or you end up on the wrong path. You end up lost for a little bit. Well, you
Mm.
can't last for long in Jamaica still, but you lost for a little bit and you have to pivot and figure things out. Sometimes you
Right.
go to a place and somebody tell you about somewhere else in the area that you never know about before, and you end up going off the planned itinerary that you had for the day and end up with an even more rewarding adventure.
Mm.
So yeah, you have to really learn to pivot and deal with
Mhm.
change and with unexpected things when you choose to travel.
Mhm. Have you ever traveled solo or no? That
Well,
is
I haven't traveled far solo, I will say
okay.
that much. And it's really for safety. I'm pretty sure I would be okay if I go out alone. I know lots of people who do it,
Mhm.
but it's a little out of my comfort zone. So I usually tend to travel with at least one person at least.
Mhm.
Anything I've done solo tend to be more, maybe more, a little closer to home.
Closer to home.
Right.
But this is what you do part-time. You're a doctor, right? So
Yes.
tell me a little about that, about your career in medicine.
Right. Okay. So a career in medicine is something I've always wanted. From I know myself. Initially, I wanted to be a dentist, but somewhere or the other along the line, that changed into being a doctor because I thought I would have been able to have a bit more impact that way. I did the sciences in high school. Well, actually did a bit of both. I did the
Mhm.
sciences, but I'd also done history, literature, and I did Spanish as well. So my subjects have always kind of been more geared towards the
Geared
sciences
towards.
though. And right after high school, well, after sixth form, I'd applied to medical school. That was the only school I applied to
Mhm.
because I was pretty sure at that point that this is what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
So straight out of high school, I went into medical school, graduated on time at the end of 5 years, and went straight into internship. And then afterwards, I went straight into residency in internal medicine.
Mhm.
So now I've been practicing for a total of 4 years. Well, 4 years going on 5. It's been, I think the thing for me, you remember the pandemic, it was just coming out of the pandemic. So it's it's probably a unique situation for us as young medical graduates to have been thrust right into a pandemic after medical school.
Mhm.
So we entered probably the world's most serious humanitarian crisis, or most serious health crisis rather, in 100 years. The last pandemic we've really had been as far back as the early 1900s. So
Mhm.
it was rough. It was a trying time. I questioned, after those long 12-hour shifts where, the outcome, as
Yes.
we know, for
Mhm.
patients wasn't
Mhm.
always the best. You found yourself questioning, is this really what I
Whether
want
you're
to do?
really what you wanted to do.
Yeah, man,
Mhm.
I would say it has been a trying time to leave medical school and 6 months later basically
Yes.
thrust into a pandemic. It was rough.
So for my younger guest, Rochelle, you mentioned internal medicine. Tell us a little about that. What is internal medicine?
Okay. Internal medicine is a very broad field. I'll start off
Mhm.
there, but it's the backbone of medicine. Internal medicine actually manages the most common conditions or the most common reasons why a lot of patients will come to hospital. It has, well, 8 main subspecialties. So it includes the care for the lungs, the heart, the kidneys, the brain and nervous system, hormones or like hormone imbalances, and infectious diseases as well. So things like HIV. We also manage autoimmune conditions as well. So things like lupus, scleroderma. We manage sickle cell disease as well and certain other blood diseases. So it's a very broad specialty. For a lot of persons, internal medicine is basically a stepping stone. And from there, you can go on to do a fellowship and choose one of those previously mentioned organs
Mhm.
to zone in on and make that your main practice.
So what is the most common health conditions that you've seen in our hospitals?
Okay, so we see a lot of sickle cell disease because patients with sickle cell will sometimes have different crises, including pain. They'll have some infections as well, which is unique to that population. So we see a lot of that. We'll also see asthma, heart failure, hypertension, diabetes, and its complications, including heart attack and stroke. And we also see a lot of kidney failure as well. Those are, I think, the main things that we see.
Mm-hmm. So you're presently doing your doctorate as well, about your research, what it's about.
Okay, sure. So internal medicine in Jamaica is offered as a doctorate program. So it's a 4-year program and it basically makes you a specialist at the end of it. In order to fulfill the requirements for your program, you have to do research. And it's always good to do a topic of interest because research can be quite intense. And if you're not interested in what you're doing, it will make it very, very tedious. So I chose to do research in an area which is very dear to my heart, in that I have worked for a total of 6 months in nephrology, which is the area of medicine that has to do with the kidneys. Kidney failure is it's a very difficult diagnosis to have, and it's very common in Jamaica. We have a lot of hypertension and diabetes here. As many as 1 in every 4 adult Jamaicans will be diagnosed with hypertension, and diabetes is not too far behind as well. 1 in every 6 Jamaicans have or will have diabetes. So what it means is, if those are the conditions which cause kidney failure, and we have such a high prevalence of these two illnesses here, it goes hand in hand that would also have very high rates of kidney failure. We also see kidney failure from other conditions too. Things like lupus, things like sickle cell disease can cause kidney failure. And we also see some other unusual pathologies, things that have to do with autoimmune conditions or things that affect the blood vessels can cause kidney failure. We also see kidney failure in some agricultural areas of Jamaica, basically something that causes hardening of the kidneys. So basically, there's a lot of kidney failure here, and it's a very, very difficult diagnosis, in that these patients will now require lifelong dialysis, which is a treatment that you'll need ideally 3 times per week to filter toxins from the blood. A session of dialysis privately right now is extremely expensive. Each session costing an average of 15 to 20,000 Jamaican dollars. And remember, I said that you need it 3 times a week. So basically, we're looking at hundreds of thousands, not to mention the cost of the drugs are also very expensive. And therefore, a lot of these patients too, they're weak. Some of them are elderly, but others are young and still within the working or productive years of their life. But their productivity is going to be affected if they're not too ill to work. So, right. So we have people who are being faced with these enormous medical bills, but they can't work. And even if they were working, the salaries that they'll probably be earning wouldn't even be enough for their treatments. That being said, there are some options publicly where there are public dialysis centers, at Spanish Town, at Mandeville Regional. Those are some of the hospitals, and KPH as well, and Cornwall Regional. These are the centers that offer public dialysis, but then spaces are extremely limited. A lot of these hospitals will probably only have about 10 machines, 8 to 10 machines, which means that there's a limit to the number of persons they can offer dialysis. So we have hundreds of people, over 1,000 people needing dialysis, but yet probably each hospital may only be able to accommodate maybe like 50 or so persons, which means that the overwhelming majority of people who need dialysis cannot access it. And I don't think I need to say what that will spell for them, right? So what my study is, I say all of that to justify the importance of my study. So I am doing a study on depression, quality of life, and also food security in dialysis patients in Jamaica. Actually, to some degree, it will be a groundbreaking study in that it hasn't been, well, there's one study that was done locally on quality of life, but it's quite an outdated study. It was done over a decade ago. and it won't be as comprehensive as some of the things that I will be including in mine. So the aim of doing this study is to show that quality of life of Jamaican patients living with kidney failure is low. It's not up to global standard right now. And I am hoping that if this study gets published in international peer-reviewed journals, it will be something that can, be used as leverage to the Jamaican government to try and have more subsidized spots available for Jamaicans living with kidney failure. And hopefully their quality of life can improve.
Boy, it seemed like a lot though, Rochelle. And a lot of work as well.
Yes.
So I can see how you'd want to travel and any free time that you get.
Yeah.
As a means of relaxation and to take off your mind off of work.
Exactly. It's basically just an outlet for me. That's what travel blogging is, or that's what it has become. Because the things I see at work on a daily basis are rough, and sometimes it takes a toll on you, So having an outlet is what's probably been keeping me thus far, and will continue to keep me sane and, refreshed and able to care for my patients in the way that they need.
You spoke a lot about kidney disease. Is this a lifestyle illness?
It can be in some cases, because a lot of, or at least 70% of kidney failure in Jamaica comes from hypertension and diabetes. And unfortunately, lifestyle plays an important role in the managing of these conditions. So if persons are able to adjust their lifestyle to ensure the management of these chronic illnesses, if they do develop them, they actually can prevent kidney failure. Yes, they can.
What lifestyle change do you think we can make to prevent
kidney disease? So the same lifestyle changes that will prevent heart attacks and strokes and so on, it's actually the same changes that will prevent kidney disease. And these include eating well. So in other words, eating the right balance of fruits and vegetables each day, avoiding extra salt, avoiding excess carbs and processed foods, and especially simple sugars as well. So a lot of sweets, or a whole lot of heavy starches. So a lot of rice and, those starches, especially in the proportions that a lot of Jamaicans eat them, actually is not healthy. So that would be one of the most important steps. Secondly, limiting alcohol intake. Thirdly, limiting or avoiding smoking altogether. So that involves not smoking yourself, not being around other persons who smoke. And then lastly, exercise. It's recommended that we do 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week. And that includes things like aerobic activity, walking, swimming, jogging. Also, weightlifting can be useful too. But any kind of exercise you enjoy, anything that involves movement, playing football, running around with your kids, those are things that will help to stave off lifestyle illnesses like hypertension and diabetes. And if you do develop those illnesses, it will improve your control. Lastly, I would add, knowing your numbers is very important. Sometimes when we diagnose these illnesses like hypertension and diabetes, a lot of persons have already developed complications of these illnesses at the point of diagnosis. And if they were doing their annual checks, at least just once a year, do a panel check to see how your numbers are, things like your weight, things like your blood sugar, your blood pressure. We actually can really prevent a lot of complications, including chronic kidney disease and kidney failure.
All right. I discovered that you're a Campionite as well. Tell me a little about that.
Yeah, so, well, Campion College was my first choice when I did BSAT all the way back in 2007.
Yes.
It was my first choice, and before that, what I knew about the school was just that a lot of people who do very well, who go on to excel in life, go there. I knew that they had the best grades when it comes to CXC performance. And I said, well, if they're doing very well and they're topping the island, if they're
Yes.
not number one, they're number two. Every
You
year
want
it's
to be there.
always Campion. Yeah, man, I said I have to be there. So, I worked hard for it, and Campion never disappointed. Campion, I think, has played a pivotal role in molding me into the person I am. It's a very competitive environment, which for some people can be a bit rough, but it forces you to perform well because you can't slack off. If you slack off, you end up at the back of the class.
Yes.
And no one wants to be at the back of the class. But it's like it forces you to do well.
Mhm.
And what I love about Campion is that it doesn't encourage mediocrity at all. It tells you that, if you did well, no, you got a 90%, then next time you should be aiming for 91. You get it? You
Yes.
should aim for 92. If you get 100%, then you should now aim to be first in the island, first in the Caribbean. It's very competitive. They push those things, and therefore you'll find a lot of campaigns placing on the top list of CXC and the CAPE lists every year, just based on that culture, which is basically ingrained in us from the start.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. So before you leave, though, leave a message for young people.
Okay. Any field at all of interest. It doesn't have to be the traditional jobs of medicine, law, engineering, anything at all that you're interested in. Just work hard. Try to be the best in your field. And it doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily be competing against people. Just run your own race, stay in your lane, put in the work, try to network well, meet people in the fields in which you're trying to get into, and just really put in the work. Success is never an overnight thing. Success is something that comes after years upon years, even decades sometimes, of working in silence. So I would say, don't be daunted. Don't look at, the instant gratification thing now, which is being promoted on social media, where people think you can get rich overnight. Yes, it may happen for some, but it won't happen for the majority, and it won't be sustainable for the most part. So just keep putting in the work. Enjoy life as you go along too, because life is meant to be lived and to be enjoyed, but always put in the work and good things will come.
Mhm. It was great talking to you, Rochelle. I enjoyed this interview. I've learned a lot as well. And I'm sure persons will tune in and will learn from it too. It was great talking to you.
Thank you for having me too. It was great.